So my name is Brandy Balkin, and I, as Gretchen mentioned, am the Executive Director of Equality Utah. And I really do want to sincerely thank you for joining us for this, our fourth in our series of town hall meetings, Equality in My Community. Tonight, for me personally, is an incredibly important evening. Doing work for full LGBT equality is what we do at Equality Utah. And I have to be completely candid with you and sharing with you that frequently I hear from our LGB friends, help me understand about the T. Help me understand about that. Help me understand about the inclusion, how we do it right. And I think that it's really important for us who are advocating for our own rights in this community to really begin to have open dialogues about what we need to understand and the framework that we need to be working within so that we really can achieve equality for each and every one of us. That this is the meaning of the movement of equality, right, is that we all have access to it. It means that nobody gets left out and nobody gets left behind, and that we all have the opportunity to tell our truths and speak on our own behalf. So I just wanted to share with you sort of the impetus for us at Equality Utah in wanting to partner with not only the UMFA, thank you so much, Gretchen, as well as T. We have many board members from T here this evening. I also want to acknowledge Transaction, which is a program of the Utah Pride Center, who are also fantastic partners in doing education, advocacy, awareness, and support of our transgender brothers, sisters, neighbors, and friends. Another reason that we're here tonight is because if you haven't noticed, Equality Utah's been pretty laser focused on this thing called non-discrimination in employment and housing. For those of you who are not aware, in the state of Utah and 34 other states, if you're purely measuring gender identity and expression, you can be fired, you can be evicted, you can be passed up for a promotion, you can be docked pay, you can be denied being shown a house purely because you are or are perceived to be gay or transgender. And we are out to change that. These are the most basic of human rights, so we all deserve access to protecting the people that we love, providing housing for them, and working to earn a living. And that's our policy priority, our top legislative priority, although full equality is where we're headed. And tonight we want to talk about the meaning of including all folks within that. So, here's the other piece maybe to set the ground, right? Transgender Utahns are really experiencing some of the highest levels of unemployment in our populations throughout the state, and also have some of the highest levels of insecurity when it comes to housing. It's not a fluke, it's not a mistake, it's the result of discrimination, which is why, again, it's so important that we be having these kinds of conversations. So tonight, we really want to have sort of a humanizing experience, right? A get to know your neighbor sort of panel discussion, and hope to get a glimpse into the lived experience of the some 11,000 transgender Utahns that are here within our state that we share community with. So with that, I'd like to introduce our esteemed panel, but first I would like to thank each and every one of you for being here with us tonight, for taking the time out of your busy schedules to share your stories, and to just have this discussion with us. It's certainly, it's our honor to host this. And actually, I have one more thing I'd like to mention that I think is actually kind of a fabulous step in our community. I want to acknowledge the Acting Chief of Police of the West Valley City Police Department, Anita Schremer, as well as Deputy Julie Jorgensen, who are here, and they came here tonight just to get some more information, understanding that it's important to do outreach and be educated about folks in our community. So again, my name is Brandy Balkin, and I would like to start by saying my preferred pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I would like to ask that each of the folks on the panel introduce themselves, introduce their identity, as well as I'd also like for you, if you would, tell me something that you really love to do, like one of your favorite things or one of the things you like best about Utah. Just, a little fun fact.
A fun fact. Okay. Get him started. Yeah, I get to go first. Okay. So, my name is Sarah Woodhouse, and I am a transsexual woman, and my preferred pronouns are she, her, and Ms., I guess.
I'll take Ms.
And, one of my favorite things to do? Oh, I love to play video games.
My name is Candace Metzler, and I'm the board president of T of Utah. And I'd like to kind of just take this opportunity to recognize Equality Utah in putting this together and thank them and the Utah Museum of Fine Arts for giving us this wonderful format tonight. It's certainly a discussion that's important. I'm also a student here at the University of Utah, so it's nice to be on my home turf. I'm also a board member of Equality Utah, and the work that Equality Utah does is certainly, it's making an incredible impact in starting these kinds of discussions. So I identify as me, first of all and foremost. I don't know that I identify with a particular gender, but I think doing Candace is what I do best. And I think within the LGBT framework, it probably would surprise most people that I identify as a lesbian more than I identify as transgender. But my experience does fall along the lines of a lot of transgender experiences, and so therefore it works out in the end. A fun fact about me is I love to explore the backcountry of Utah, and I love to climb.
Weird magic box. Hey, my name is Owen Smith, and I am a program and field organizer with Equality Maryland, which is kind of a sibling organization to Equality Utah. So I'm really honored to be asked to be here today. I identify as a transmasculine, genderqueer person. My preferred pronouns are they and them. If that doesn't work for you for grammar, that's cool. He works really well for me too. Okay, so I just want to say, like, as somebody who does activism for trans folks to empower trans community people in Maryland and also throughout the country, I want to say that my heart is so filled with gratitude for all of you being here today. I really feel like Utah is the place. This is like the next frontier. You all have what it takes to really push full equality forward, not only here, but through the entire country. And I am so grateful to all of you for being here today. My fun fact, I rescue pit bulls.
Hi, my name is Drake. That's what I go by down here in Salt Lake. I am actually the co-president of a nonprofit organization called the Royal Court of the Golden Spike Empire. At home, I go by Alex, but here I will be Drake. I identify as a trans man. And my preferred pronouns are he, him, Drake, things like that. Fun fact about me is I love Disneyland. Anything Disney, anything that has to do with Iron Man, and any type of cartoons. And what I do for fun is, if I'm not doing fundraising or whatever, I like to go to movies or just hang out with my friends and play cards. So.
Hello, I'm Alex, and I am on the board of T of Utah. So thanks for having us, Brandy and Equality Utah. I use male pronouns, and I'm a trans man. I identify as a trans man. So for me, that includes embracing a female past. That's very much part of who I am as a man, was how I was raised as female. So something fun about me, I really like traveling. I've been to 13 countries and I've lived overseas for a couple of years. But really my favorite places to travel are southern Utah. So thanks.
My name's Dane. I identify as a trans man also, on some days. Sometimes genderqueer, depending on how I feel. Mostly prefer masculine pronouns, but I answer to most anything as long as it's not derogatory. One fun fact, I love to snorkel. It's my newest hobby. I just spent some time in Hawaii, so did a lot of snorkeling there. And I'm also on the board of T here locally and very much active in the community, in the LGBT community and the trans community both. And that's it. Thanks.
Fantastic, thanks. We really have a wonderful panel of fantastic community activists, people who really did well, not only in our community, but actually across the country, in doing advocacy work and in really building and educating our communities. So with this, I think we're going to start to dig into just kind of personal experiences, right? And I actually want to make sure, Dane, do you have a microphone down at your end as well? Okay, awesome. So because we've got some technological restraints here, we're going to ask folks to pass the mics back and forth if you would, please. Sarah, I'd like to start with you. Could you share with us what it was like for you to come out? When you realized that you had a coming out process to address. Could you share that story with us, please?
Sure. It kind of comes in two stages, I guess, because I realized very, very young that something was different. Probably, well, as soon as I started recognizing that there was a difference between boys and girls, I just knew that I was different. Didn't have a word for it, of course, growing up in small town southern Utah. Salem was where I grew up. Didn't have any idea what a transsexual was at all. Had no idea. And it wasn't until I got to USU for my undergrad BFA program, and I was in a play called Come Back to the Five and Dime, Jimmy Dean, which has a transsexual character in it. And I played Joe, who later becomes Joanne. And as such, I needed to research that character. Sorry, I need to face the mic. And that was the first time I learned that there was anything like that. And a light went on in my head, and I was like, oh, that's me. But of course, trying to be a proper young Mormon boy, I fought it for as many years as I could, got married, had a child, beautiful baby girl, and my first coming out was to my now ex-wife at the time. We were saying our nightly prayers as usual, and I just didn't get up off the floor. And she knew something was wrong and kept prodding, and I said, I came out. She was the first person I came out to. So it was kind of tough. It was a bad night. But do you want me to go on there? No.
If you feel compelled to do so, then yes, I would say that.
Right. So immediately I said, well, this is a problem that is my problem. I'll fix it. And I tried for the next few years. We saw various religious counselors and licensed counselors, and the surprising thing was they all kind of said the same thing. They said, you're not sick. They can't fix you. This is just what you are, and you have to decide what you're going to do about it. And of course I was floored, because I was like, aren't you going to send me away to camp or something? Fix me, give me, I don't know, some medication, I don't know. But so we tried I again tried to make it work for probably 2 more years after that, until we finally just decided it was time to separate, and we did. And then I started living full-time as Sarah in January of 2005. And I've been living as Sarah ever since. So
I'd like to actually send the second question to you, Alex, and I'd like to ask you, what is the greatest thing, or as you look back, can you describe for me, what has been the greatest thing with regards to your coming out as a trans man?
Well, the greatest thing about coming out, I think there's really no price on living authentically. And sometimes it can be a little overly simplified. I know a lot of people ask, well, are you happy? And yeah, I mean, I would say I'm happier, but that wasn't the objective. The objective was to live an authentic life, and sometimes that can come with challenges. But the being able to look in the mirror and actually kind of fixate on the mirror is different, right? So that's kind of, that's a new process. That's a whole new experience. And also coming to terms with the kind of guy I am. I didn't transition to be anyone's idea of what a man is. And so one thing I found really freeing is, as I started my transition and started presenting more masculinely, I was able to be a lot more effeminate. I had a lot more flexibility within my own code, that I was okay with certain expressions that I would never have been okay with before. So yeah, I guess the biggest is living authentically.
Can I ask you actually a quick follow-up about that? And that is, you mentioned the sort of your self-definition of what it was to live as a man. And I wonder, and maybe this is for kind of just a head nod on the full panel, do you feel like there's an opportunity for you to sort of self-define the kind of expressive person that you are on your own? Is there more of an opportunity to do that? Or do you feel like there's really more of a limitation put on you to represent or present in a very specific way?
I think originally when I started my transition, and I see this happen with other people as well, I was focused on being really hyper masculine, and so that was limiting. And then it just didn't matter, right? Then I just realized whatever you saw me as a guy, I don't really care about that. So then that box became a lot more open. And so for instance, before I transitioned, I never dated men because I was reluctant to be the girlfriend. I couldn't embrace that role. And then once I came to terms with my male identity, then I realized I wasn't the girlfriend if I was dating a boy. So all of a sudden I had the ability to be more free and just open with myself. And I also, like, my own ideas of masculinity, they don't have to be what your ideas are. So that was freeing. And this whole process, it's kind of cool because you do get to reinvent yourself, and it can be overwhelming, but it's a chance to just start all over, even like trying to figure out a name, and that trying to figure out your own name, like that's impossible, you know? Because there are a lot of people who have screwed up that name for me for the rest of my life, you know? And so the whole process of being able to reinvent myself was really freeing. It was also incredibly overwhelming.
Would anyone else like to respond to that secondary question? Okay, great, thank you. So I'd like to move on to something maybe a little bit more specific that we're seeing here in Utah and across the country. So a quick statistic nationally, 1 in 20 transgender people are homeless currently today. And I'd like to ask Candace if you could share with the audience if you've ever been impacted by homelessness.
I'd be happy to do that. So yeah, part of my process of transition ended up, like it's similar for a lot of people's stories, is that I lost many of the things like the securities that I had probably taken for granted quite a bit before that. One of those things was my employment status. Up to that point, I'd spent a lifetime. My father was a general contractor, and I'd spent a lifetime in construction. And largely, I had become a general contractor, and I'd spent my life really developing that profession. And I'd shut down my business a little bit before that, but probably a couple years after that, I went to work as a home inspector. And while I was a home inspector, I ended up getting laid off. I had a great deal of support from, my boss at the time, but the result was that inevitably I got laid off, and I had a lot of trouble finding future employment. And the result of that was that I ended up, defaulting on a lot of loans, a lot of things like that, and things like food security and housing became very difficult to maintain, and I ultimately ended up losing my housing while I was still working towards my degree. It put a lot of stress on me and my family, and ultimately, left me in a position where I had to rely on other people to do something as simple as provide a meal, or to let me sleep on their couch, and I was able to couch surf for a period of time, but I also have 2 children that watched me go through this process, and the insecurity that brought to their lives has been long-lasting. I mean, it's still something that my youngest is certainly hypersensitive towards my well-being. And so the end result of that is that, at one point I ended up sleeping on the streets. I found myself on park benches. And I kept going to school here at the University of Utah, trying to hope that something would come together. And luckily, financial aid and certain things like that helped kind of buffer that a little bit. And eventually, through the help of friends in my community, I was able to kind of get my feet back on the ground.
Thank you for sharing that. And I do think, as I mentioned in the introduction, it's really important to acknowledge that we have members of our community that are facing much higher levels of insecurity, not because of their inability to do a great job at work, and not because of their inability to maintain a regular, consistent schedule and a regular, normal life. It's because in those situations of employment and housing, people are facing an additional barrier. They're being seen as somehow not welcome, not acceptable in those positions. And the impact that that has on a person's life, as Candace mentioned, really is long-lasting, and not just on Candace's life, but on Candace's family's life, her children's lives. And I think that when we work on policy, when we talk about policy, it's also crucially important that we acknowledge the human aspect of that. That policy isn't just words on a paper. It's not just, do we include gender identity? Do we include gender expression? I think we owe it to our community to take the time to think about the real human impact that the inclusion or exclusion of those terms means. It really does translate into impact on someone's life. And digging in a little bit more on unemployment, the statistics nationally state that 90% of trans-identified people have experienced harassment or mistreatment at work. 76% of trans people report losing their job for no other reason than being transgender. Here in the state of Utah, our statistics, or reported statistics, are a little bit lower at 67% of trans people reporting harassment, mistreatment, firing, passing over for a promotion, or denial even for an interview. So not only are trans people experiencing high rates of unemployment, also high rates of underemployment, right? Several part-time jobs, difficulty accessing good long-term benefits employment, right? And that also has to be considered when we talk about employment discrimination. So I'd like to ask you, Dane, if you would share with us your experiences in employment.
Yeah, actually, I've never lost a job because of my trans status, and I feel pretty fortunate that way, but I have experienced some harassment. Actually, when I was living in Hawaii, I had a part-time job, and I was harassed by a coworker who was saying things about trans people and the trans policies that were being introduced in some states around the country. We probably have heard of some of those, Arizona being one. Anyways, it was brought up in conversation, and of course, people started talking about it and started talking about trans people, and then that led to me coming out, which led to further harassment by this particular individual, and I was hesitant to bring it up to my management, but I finally did, because I decided that things weren't going to change if I didn't say something. I could have just shoved it under the rug and pretend it never happened, just like we often do when we hear people talking about race or making, sexist jokes or things like that. Sometimes we have to choose our battles, but this particular time I felt like it was a battle that needed to be fought. So I did file a claim with my employer, and fortunately Hawaii has a protection for gender identity and sexual orientation. So I had that on my side as well, and the person was dismissed. However, it was very traumatizing for me to go through that, and I really haven't spoken about it a lot since then, but the weeks following the whole event and just the interviews that I had to endure, and I felt like I had to relive that over and over again, with my employer and with investigation. So that was very traumatizing. The other thing that I've experienced is at my current employer, who I've been advocating for. We have insurance coverage, and the insurance explicitly states in the exclusions that no transgender care, surgical, hormonal, or therapeutic will be covered under our plan. And so I've been a huge advocate at my place of employment, and I've brought it up to our HR department. I've given presentations to numerous people higher management, sent various emails, and over the past year probably had at least a dozen conversations with people at my work. And we just had recent open enrollment, and no changes were made, which was a little disappointing for me because I don't want to go through any more of this. This could lead to litigation. But anyways, long story short, I'm filing a claim with the EEOC, a discrimination claim. And now, I don't know if all of you guys know this, but transgender is now a protected status. It's included under the Title VII Civil Rights Act of 1964 based on sex discrimination. So I've been doing my homework, and I'm going to be hopefully winning. And I mean, my ultimate goal is it's not about money, it's not about surgery, it's not about me. It's about people behind me that are going to be working there, who are going to be affected at some level if things don't change. So I really feel it's my obligation to do something about it. So.
Thank you, Dane. So I think in this section something that's really important to mention with regards to being an ally, right? One of the things that I consistently seek to do is learn how I can be a better ally. As a very feminine presenting cisgender woman, how do I learn to step up and speak appropriately and advocate in situations where it's the right thing to do? And I think that the situation that Dave described is really a perfect opportunity, right? It's a perfect opportunity to advocate. It's a perfect opportunity to use the privilege that I have to advocate on behalf of someone who is at risk at work. And I have to tell you that studies are going on right now nationally about people who are not out at work. And they're not out at work because they're afraid of retribution, they're afraid of losing their job, they're afraid of continued harassment, they're afraid of being punished for bringing it up. There are people who are afraid to even access benefits that their office provides for fear of the retribution that will cause. That has a real impact on people's lives on a day-to-day basis. To hear people say detrimental things about yourself, your friends, your family, it's what we call a microaggression, right? And it hits you every day, and it starts to wear you down. It starts to bring you down on a daily basis. And part of the reason that I'm bringing this forward is that if we are allies, it's not only our opportunity, but in many ways it's our responsibility to learn how we can do that effectively and to learn how to speak about it effectively. And so I think, I imagine how different that would have been for you, Dane, if there had been a couple of your coworkers who would have said to this person who was offensive, wow, that's so not cool. Why would you ever talk about human beings like that? That's not how this workplace goes. Instead of asking the person who is already feeling vulnerable to put themselves in an even more vulnerable position by being the one who has to speak up. This is, in my mind, one of the clearest opportunities that we have to community build, right? To build safety, to build networks, and to build the understanding that respect is the baseline, right? That's how we roll here. So I didn't want to take up too much time on that, but I think it's really important for those of you in this room who maybe are on your path to becoming an ally. This is an excellent opportunity to step up and do that, right? Just an excellent opportunity to be in that position. Dane, you also mentioned healthcare, so I'd like to move the conversation there. Again, to a statistic, 28% of transgender people report postponing necessary medical care for fear of harassment or mistreatment at a hospital or with a doctor. And Drake, I'd like to ask you if you'd be willing to speak about your experience with postponing medical care or going to the doctor.
Yeah, I've had a couple of them, actually. Alex and I actually talked about this last week. I suffer from a lot of UTIs now because I don't use the public bathroom just because it causes a lot of stress on me to go into a men's restroom. just because of fears that I have. So it creates UTIs for me. So, and I haven't really, I wait too long to go to the doctor just because it's very difficult to go to the doctor and be like, hey, my name is Alex, and, my medical records say male, and oh, by the way, I have a UTI, and, but I also have,
Yeah, surprise.
it's a surprise. And, and so I've held off going to the doctor many times where it's gotten so painful that I can barely walk. And I have been turned down for care at Instacares before. I have also been turned down when I had pneumonia for a chest x-ray because I had had surgery. And they weren't really, apparently they just didn't feel comfortable, or they weren't really sure of how to, provide me care. One of the doctors that turned me down was like, well, you're on testosterone. We're really not sure what kind of, what we can do for you. And it's like, well, men take testosterone and you can treat them. But, the doctors just many doctors feel very uncomfortable because I guess they just don't have a very good educational background on trans care at all. Although I have been fortunate enough to have found finally a family doctor that had done a residency with Dr. Lucanar, who is a doctor down here that many of us see. And he has made it very easy for me lately to be able to go get the care that I need any place that I go, which I am very grateful for. So that's it.
Thank you. So I think, throughout the course of this conversation, what we're really starting to see is that, well, many of us may not have ever experienced it ourselves. The discrimination or the exclusion or the feelings of vulnerability are not just existing in one place. It's not just happening, when you go to work at this hostile employer, or it's not just happening with your jerk of a landlord. We're talking about pervasive, consistent, exclusionary behavior to people within our community, to human beings who are our brothers, our sisters, our neighbors, our friends, our family, and it's really important, I think, for us to get present, right? Especially if we don't have that experience ourselves, to how pervasive this kind of experience can be for some of our friends and family. I want to move this to yet another area of life that we see some issues with, and this is public accommodations. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the legal term public accommodations, this is basically hotels and restaurants, right? This is public spaces. It can be parks, it can be baseball fields, it can be dressing rooms, it can be, the Walmart or the Kmart or the wherever. Like, this is public space. Any place where services are provided publicly are considered by the law public accommodations. And I'd like to ask actually Owen if you would discuss any experiences you might have had with public accommodations.
Sure. I can talk slightly broadly as well. I live in Maryland, and one of the things that has happened to me is I was actually had my life threatened in a grocery store. I was being harassed by someone who had a problem with me being trans. It was a customer, not a worker. And so the cashier, was just like, oh, you can't do that. Let's call the police. Awesome. So the police were going to come, and they were called to help me, right? They were called to protect me. And what ended up happening is this woman who was screaming horrible transphobic things at me in my direction, threatening my life, and actually my friend's life as well. Listened to this woman who then said that I was threatening her. And what ended up happening is I was falsely imprisoned by the police officer and harassed until I was able to get the giant staff to show them the video where they actually were able to see that I actually had done nothing. I hadn't even spoken to the person. And the reason I bring that up is because public accommodations also include public safety people. So that's firefighters, that's EMTs, and that's police. And I am so glad that you are here so that you can hear some of the things that happens, because what I'm talking about is not an uncommon story, and I know it happens here in Utah. I've heard people share their stories with me about that before. So thank you for being here, because this is a great first step, and it shows great willingness on your part. And I just needed to say that. Also, as not a... as not a Utah resident, as somebody who just came to visit, I actually was just here a few weeks ago, and I came here and I went to a deli. I was hungry. That's why we go to the deli, right? So I went to the deli to get a sandwich, and I ordered my sandwich, you know, my turkey avocado, it's my favorite sandwich. I ordered my sandwich, and what happened was I was going to pay, and my identity documents aren't changed. So my legal name is Heidi, not Owen. Do I look like a Heidi? No. So what ended up happening is the woman looked at my credit card and she saw my name. She asked me to see my ID. Okay, that's fair. It says please see ID on the back of my credit card. But then she handed it back to me. But by hand it back to me, I mean she slid it across the table and wouldn't take anything directly from my hands. And she said, "This is a family establishment. We can't help people like you." And I was asked to leave. So, like,
What was it?
I actually don't know the name. I'm not from here. I'm sorry. I was by a park, by the library. I'm sorry. I don't know. So that happened, and again, like, when we're talking about public spaces, we're also talking about restaurants. We're also talking about homeless shelters. Like, I have been somebody who has lived every single statistic that Brandy is reading. I am a living example of all the statistics. I've been homeless. I've been denied an apartment. I've lost my job. I've been beaten by my boss. Okay? I've been harassed by police. I've been mistreated by police. And I'm sharing these things with you not to scare you, but so that you all understand that so many transgender people are facing these things in your own communities too. And I feel it is my responsibility as somebody who is now living the American dream, right? Like, I have a job now, right? I can afford my rent. I can rescue pit bulls, right? I can do those things, and I need to share with you those things so that you understand what fellow community members are also going through who don't have the power and aren't empowered to be here today. So I really want to make sure that you all understand that, and thank you again for listening.
Actually, I'd like to follow up on that because the situation that you started out with, Owen, I think is a really important thing for folks to understand. So when we do studies and we talk about employment and housing non-discrimination, specifically employment non-discrimination, what we find is that people are really very sympathetic if some people were somehow outed, right? Like they didn't come out on their own, that they didn't act gay or act transgender, whatever that means on the job, that they didn't somehow call attention to themselves as not being normative, that if your employer finds out and you're fired or you're passed over or whatever that looks like, it's much more easy for people to empathize with that. But the situation that Owen describes is a situation that many transgender people find themselves in, where either their historical employment documentation, their names don't match or gender marker does not match, and they're never really given a choice. Like me as a femme passing lesbian, I basically, well I don't since now I'm the ED of Equality Utah, I sort of assumed to be, but before I did this job, I was always given the choice. Always had the choice as to whether or not I was going to come out, right? I got to pick. It's a weird way to express it, but I got to have that power every time. And many of our friends who are transgender, regardless of where they are in transitioning, do not have that option, right? They simply don't have the option with their employment history, with their ID documents, with buying a sandwich, right? Don't get a choice as to whether or not they want to identify. And I think this is a point I actually also want to hit on our roads to being allies, and I include myself on this path. I often hear when we're talking about employment discrimination, housing discrimination, etc., when people say, again, the sexual orientation thing, need some help understanding gender identity and expression, what is it about including the T? And if there's one thing, there are two things I want you to walk out of here with tonight. If there's one thing I want you to walk out of here tonight, if you seek to be an ally, I want you to understand this, that gender expression impacts each and every one of us. It's so important for us to protect people's ability to express their gender, because this is how you dress, it's how you speak, it's what your mannerisms are. This is not a characteristic of a certain category of people. Every human being has a gender expression, and if in any way your expression is non-normative, people can take action to exclude you. These are our kids in school who are a little bit too effeminate or too masculine. This is my cute wife, who I like to go into the restroom with at public places, just so that there's none of us, right? This is all of us. And so when we start to draw barriers in our own communities about people, well, you know what, if you just be a little bit more, if you could just maybe not out yourself, or if you could just kind of, we're not being very effective allies, right? And we're not really owning the full diversity of our community. So the other thing will come later that I really want you to walk out of here with, but I think that's a really key point, is understanding how these characteristics that people speak about some of us are actually characteristics that impact all of us. And that it's really very important for us to learn how to speak about it effectively and ally for it effectively. So thank you for letting me have that soapbox ally moment. I have a last question for each of you on the panel, if you would see. Oh, did you have? Yeah. So last question. I wonder if each of you could just take a few moments and give us a sense of the work that you see that's needed to happen in our community here to feel like trans folks are fully included and embraced.
I think probably one of the most important aspects of our work is just education. I mean, I think so many people are out there without any idea of what it means to be transgender, transsexual, genderqueer, any of these titles that we have given each other. We don't understand what they are, and so as a result, a lot of people are walking around in ignorance. And being an educator, I just think that education is the most important thing we can do.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of piggyback off of Sarah here and say that education is certainly what I see as the key to this. I do a lot of public education. I've been working at this for a lot of years. And I have a little bit of a different take, and I think for me what is important is to break us out of these boxes and realize the human factor here, that at the end of the day, whether we're talking about an issue around gender identity or gender expression, that whether it's sexual orientation, we're talking about people. And that experience is unique to each of us, and each of us wants to be affirmed in the identity that we see ourselves. And I think it's important that we recognize that humans are much more broad than just a box with an M or an F on it, that it doesn't matter what bathrooms we're going in, that people are really this beautiful, diverse species that we have largely kind of stifled.
So I'm going to say, as like this wonky policy loving field and programming nerd that I am, yes, I'm going to say that beyond non-discrimination policies, we really need to think about the other places where we actually need policies to protect people. Like, yes, change comes from education and it changes people's hearts and minds, but when you advocate for policy, it gives you a platform to do that. So I'm talking about making sure our criminal justice system places people in the right prisons when they're sex-segregated facilities. I'm talking about making sure that there's adequate HIV/AIDS testing for trans people, because trans people get HIV 4 times more than any other distinctive group. That is ridiculously high, ridiculously. So making sure that we're actually thinking about this holistically and all of the things that need to go into those policies and procedures and programs, so that we're actually making sure that we're carrying the message of their transgender siblings forward with us is what I'm going to say.
I'm going to say that, kind of the same thing. Education is extremely important, and what I've personally experienced in the different communities that I hang out in, that there is just a huge misunderstanding about what it is to be transgender or transsexual, and I spend a lot of my time in the drag community. And they just have a huge misconception about what it is like to be trans, and and even in the gay community, it's not really talked about, it's not really understood. And so, for me personally, I just I just think education is really important, and us as panelists, sharing our stories. For some of us, this is hard. For others, it's very easy, and we're all up here to, to give that human, the human experience, so that everyone understands that, we're no different than anybody else. We're just really trying to be authentic to how we feel inside. So I just think the more education, the better. And also, if you have questions, if you know someone, who's trans, ask them. They may say, I don't want to talk about it. They may say, yes, let me tell you. Let me help you understand, what it's like. And so please feel free to ask questions. Don't just assume. Don't just, just think that everybody who's trans is the same, because we're not. We all have different experiences. We've all come to our authentic place differently. So anyways, there you go.
So one thing I saw a need for is visibility, particularly in the transmasculine spectrum. Because we tend to integrate so seamlessly into society, it's really easy to not be aware that there are men who were born female, right? So it's really hard to identify with anyone if you don't know they exist. So that's why I'm here, for being visible, right? Another aspect that could be helpful is inclusive language, using language like us instead of them, not using words like "what's your real name" or "are you a real boy" or whatever, right? Like that's not inclusive. And specifically as it relates to the LGBT community, not questioning a trans person's place in LGB spaces. And that's a big one. Some of us identify as queer, some of us are lesbians, some, gay, whatever. And if I go to a gay male space, I don't need to defend my reason for being there. At least I would hope I don't have to. So I think that could be another aspect that would be helpful. Thanks.
I'm going to echo all of those things. They're all great. I want to add a few things that weren't mentioned, and of course the list is probably continues. It's probably very lengthy, but bathroom awareness is really important, I think, to transgender people. Drake kind of touched on why, and there's a lot of violence also associated with people using bathrooms, which I think is pretty pathetic. We also have a local issue here with the DLD and some of the treatment that a lot of transgender people have experienced. Just getting their picture taken for their driver's license and the harassment they've experienced. That needs to be addressed as well. Language was mentioned. We could also, as allies, and maybe trans people can also be advocates and allies, and speak up when people use exclusionary language or offensive language. One example is the media. We can write letters to Fox News or to whoever, and tell them how we feel about it. Also, a big thing is access to healthcare. We really need to be able to not only receive appropriate healthcare that we need, but we also need access to hormones and just doctors that will see us and not treat us differently. So.
And I'd actually like to interrupt for a quick second and introduce Crystal Edsey, who just joined us on the panel. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the name Crystal Edsey, there was actually a case that went on to the Utah Supreme Court that basically decided in the state of Utah that it was really, not only did we not have a policy to prevent you from being fired because of your gender identity or expression, we were actually going to rule and say that because of a person's gender identity or expression, it was legal to terminate. And I really want to honor you, Crystal, in joining us for this panel. And I wonder if you would briefly tell your story that happened with your employment at UTA.
Sure. If I can remember this, it's been a while. My name is Crystal at City. I did work for UTA back in probably about 10 years ago. And the case went through, well, actually they hired me as a bus driver. I did, I did work there. You guys can hear me good now. But I worked there pretty good. I did my reviews, my route, everything was perfectly. They wear uniforms, so you all look the same. The shirt and the pants, and really nothing changes different. But come to use the restroom time, there's like these hotels and stuff that you go to. You could use restrooms there because it's not UTA's, but that's up to you to go to bathrooms where you want to go. But when they find out that I was doing that, using the women's restroom, it was a public thing that they said it was embarrassing for them, that somebody might complain. So they did let me go from UTA for using the restroom. But we went through the court system and filed and tried to sue them and everything. But according to the state of Utah, they can't let you go for that. But I went all the way through the Supreme Court, and it's just because of Utah's law that I guess it didn't win. It didn't go in my favor. But throughout the process, it kept saying, yes, your rights were right. You're wrong. They were I guess called not violated. Yeah. So, but they couldn't do nothing about it because the laws in Utah says that's the way it is. But even the judge that did the last hearing before he went to the Supreme Court, he even said that if it was up to me, I would let you win the case because that's the way it should be in Utah. But it's not because the law is here. That's the way it's set. So that's why we end up losing. But we did go to the Supreme Court and argue it with everything. So yeah, that's kind of my story there. Any questions?
Well, I actually do want to just take this moment and say thank you to each and every one of you. One of you on the panel alluded to the fact that telling these stories aren't always easy. And I think sharing your personal story, sharing your personal vulnerability often comes at a cost. And the folks on this panel have been willing to share with all of us pieces of their personal history and pieces of their personal stories. Would you please give them a big round of applause? I think there are 2 points that I'd like to leave you with, if I may. First and foremost is, please, if you seek to become an ally, empower yourself to become one. Learn terminology. Don't expect people who you perceive to be a representative of X group to educate you. It's nobody's job to do that for you. It's your job to do it for yourself. And that's how we can become responsible allies, is to step up and take ownership of who we want to be in the world, and then start to speak and be that person. And I think, second, I would like to ask each and every one of you to consider committing. Committing to creating a community where Crystal doesn't have to have a judge say to her, hey, if it worked to me, I think it'd be totally right for you to win this case, but not going to happen. Not because our laws just don't allow it. So I would like to ask, as I bring Alejandro Mora to the microphone, for each of you to consider what steps you can take to make Utah a fair and just place. For each and every one of us, and it's going to take all of us together, one step at a time, to get us there, because today it's employment and housing, and tomorrow it's going to be documents for identification, and the day after that, it's going to take a lot of steps to get us to full equality, but we can get there. And with that, please, Alejandro.
Hi. Thank you guys, first of all, for being here. I have some notes. I'm not as eloquent as Brandon Dawkins, so forgive me for that. But thank you guys all for being here and being present for such an important conversation. I all these people. I just want to know, I wanted to create a safe space so we can all kind of ask the questions that I think, as a cisgender ally, I always just don't know if it's appropriate to ask or to really kind of explore and be curious about the transgender experience, knowing that, you know, my framework isn't congruent to their experience. But really just, I want to hit a couple of things home. So all across the state, hardworking Utahns are being fired from their jobs or evicted from their homes just for being lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender. People no different than you and me that merely want to provide for themselves and the people that they love. As we've all witnessed today, workplace and housing discrimination is real, and it is happening in every corner of our state. And the worst part is that in our state, it's completely legal to fire someone or kick someone out of their home just for being gay or transgender. The good news, though, is that every single one of us is here today. And not only that, but the most exciting, remarkable thing about living this moment in our state's history is that we are not alone. An overwhelming majority of Utahns support passage of a statewide bill that extends our existing statewide statute to include sexual orientation and gender identity, along with race and color, religion, sex, national origin, and disability. Today I stand here completely hopeful, energized, and most of all excited as I realize that together over the next 6 months, we all get to decide what our personal legacy is going to be. What kind of a home do we want to leave for our children and our children's children? Together, we get to put in place the cornerstone on which we can begin to build a community that is welcoming, affirming, and embracing of all of its people. So really what I guess I'm asking you all, and what I really want to say is that we are all incredibly important pieces of this puzzle. We really are the ones we've been waiting for, and through our stories, through our voice, and most importantly our action, we can ensure a bright future for every person in our state. Within the next few months, Equality Utah, along with a broad coalition of diverse community partners, will be launching a comprehensive campaign to pass the statewide non-discrimination bill. And all of us can do this one thing today to help continue the conversation, and that is to help us reach out to our legislators, the decision makers in our state that will help support passage of this very important bill. So today really is a day where we can make an impact by reaching out to our legislators and saying these very simple things. This affects me, my family, my neighbor, my community, and as your constituent, I need your help to pass this bill. So as we kind of pass some things around, each of you will receive a postcard that looks like this. Well, I forgot to grab one, but it looks like what you have in front of you. And a pen. And so really my big ask to everyone today is if you could please take 2 minutes and fill out this postcard, not only with your information, but really personalize why this is important to you, and then just pass it back to each of you. There's a couple of coworkers on the edge of your aisle that can pick them up on your way out. That is my big, tremendous ask to you guys. And my commitment to you is that we at Equality Utah will make sure that your postcard gets hand-delivered to your legislator, and that we're going to keep you informed about our progress in the next few months. And most importantly, how you can continue to help lead this important conversation forward and tell all Utahns can live their lives free from discrimination. So if we can all just take a couple of minutes, fill those out. There's also a few kind of handouts in there, and to kind of echo what Brandy Blockman said, they kind of will help us all on our journey to becoming effective allies. On there you'll find a list of terminologies, you know, what are good things to say, kind of the best ways to kind of frame a conversation, and just some helpful resources that were invaluable to me as I kind of began my journey a few years ago. So thank you guys for coming.
I'm going to make an unreasonable request right now. I am, so I'll acknowledge that it's unreasonable.
Yeah, ready.
You're ready. I'm going to do it. So not only are we asking you to fill out these postcards tonight, right now, an action to do right this minute, but I'm also going to ask you, as you step out into the lobby, to stop by our registration table and sign up for the next action. On Saturday, we're having a community organizing training, really getting down into the, here's how you do it. Here's how you community organize. Here's how we build the campaign to finally pass this bill. And I know it's unreasonable, but I'm going to ask each and every one of you to take the time to stop by that booth and put down your name and join us. Because that's how we're going to do it. It's actually the only way we're going to do it, is if we start showing up at these things together. So thank you for letting me steal the stage and make this unreasonable request. And again, please fill out your postcards, and thank you to the panel, thank you Alejandro, and thank you to all of you for being here.